Okay, good morning, everybody. We're on the hour, so I think we'll get started. Welcome to what is the fourth of a four-part series that we have been running with our partners, TKG. My name is Tracy Freeman. I look after investor relations and marketing for the National Trade Body and Industry Association for South Africa, BPESA, and really thrilled to have you on board with us today. We are at a phenomenal stage when it comes to where South Africa is in the global outsourcing and offshoring space. It's something that we have been working towards for a number of years collectively with a broad community and a broad industry. And TKG, as BPESA partners, kindly came on board to run a four-part series to really work with our emerging BPO community to hone in what the opportunity is, better understand what the buyer community is looking for, what clients are looking for globally. And we have been chopping that up into bite-sized chunks of how we as a country, we as a community, we as a sector, and you as operators can best engage with this growing buyer community. For those of you that haven't been aware or involved, we have as a sector, as BPESA with our partners, the DTIC and Invest SA, as well as our social partner Harambee, have crafted and created with yourselves as an industry a master plan, and that is for the global business services sector. Government has identified us as a priority sector in the country, which is massive. It obviously means that we're getting support from a resources perspective across the board. But equally so, it was really through your efforts and through the larger BPO community's efforts that we saw them seeing the opportunity and potential for our number one issue in the country, which is youth unemployment. And this happened during the time of lockdown, where we, through the standard sort of South African nature in a resilient way, really picked up and carried on operating. And it was through this that there was a silver lining in COVID, that the global community saw that South Africa is an alternate geography and realized that in order to risk mitigate, they could have a look at South Africa. Some of them were aware of us, some of them were not aware of us, but we do know that once we get them into the country, it's pretty much an 85% retention rate. But in order for that to happen, this is where our partners in TKG come through and support us in really better understanding exactly what it is that buyer community is looking for, how they can handhold our emerging BPO and our medium-sized BPOs in actually engaging with those clients and customers. It's the normal story of we don't know what we don't know, so we want to sort of fill in some of the gaps. So we've run through the journey of how to link in, how we should be pitching and selling, but we've gotten to the point now in the fourth part of the four-part series of once we have them interested, they realize how phenomenal we are as a country, how fantastic our skills are, the ability for us to do complex work beyond just CX voice, although that is our sweet spot in the English-speaking space. But how do we actually contract in with these buyers to ensure that we build up true partnerships and not just a client-provider relationship? What does that look like? How are we going to sort of activate that? So I'm thrilled today to have under the foundership and guidance and leadership of Dave Rumble, a fantastic team that's going to be engaging with us from a global perspective on how it is that we link in with our clients in order to support their customers and what that contracting process looks like. It obviously goes beyond just the contracting, but how it is that we can assist and support you in ensuring sustainable and scalable opportunities with the clients. So I think on that note, Dave, thank you again so much for the last 3 sessions. Thank you for bringing such a wonderful community of global specialists onto these sessions. It's been fantastic for us. And at this point, I think let me pass over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and thank you for the warm introduction. Yeah, look, I think obviously this is our fourth masterclass, so welcome back to anybody who has joined us for any of the previous classes, and to those who are new, welcome for the first time. Let's hope this is part of the dialogue and one of many sessions that we're able to hold in terms of the masterclass. So I think, look, just for context, this this session is an evolution on the previous ones. You can find the other three or previous three masterclasses, I think, on YouTube. Follow the link in the invitation. And this one really is much more around how we take those opportunities that we're presented. You know, we've done all of the hard work, we're in a bid process, and this is really about making sure that we make best use of the engagement. So before I start, just if I can, just give you a little bit of background on TKG, why we are doing this, and who I am joined by today. So TKG is a digital sourcing firm. So we specialize in the general business service sector. So call centers, BPO, BPM, whatever three-letter acronym that you can come up with in buying services on behalf of clients. We've got a long history with working with business in South Africa. And really what this masterclass series for us is about is engaging with the smaller suppliers to give the smaller suppliers particularly in South Africa, obviously with this association with BPESA, the opportunity to engage in conversation with us about buying processes and about the dynamics that go into source markets, the UK and more broadly into North America, which are clearly big markets for South Africa. So really, this is around helping the industry, supporting the industry develop, and us giving a contribution to the dialogue to ensure that that those opportunities, when they're presented to BPESA members, are obviously given the best chance to succeed on an international setting. So I'm joined today by Alex Marples and Leanne Rowlands. So Alex, we've known for a long time, so now in an advisory capacity, but Alex has had a long and prestigious career in client side predominantly. In fact, I think all client side, Alex. So from private sector, financial services, and then most recently, I think a very high profile project in the UK, working with government, running thousands and thousands and thousands of people in response to the pandemic and the health related issues that we had as a consequence of COVID. So Alex, very experienced from a client side, so he will be able to bring, I don't know whether you're a poacher or a gamekeeper, whichever way around it is, so he'll be able to bring that dimension. Leanne, now consulting predominantly around customer experience and technology, and the use and combination of technology in delivering great customer experience. But Leanne has been both client side and supply side, predominantly supply side. So I don't know whether that makes her a poacher or a gamekeeper. You make your own decisions about which side the fence they sit when we get to the end of the class. But I think Leanne brings a lot of experience around doing both large bids, large scale solutioning and bidding, and also small scale, where there's a lot more intimacy involved in the engagements, which I think is very rich in terms of the kind of the mix of services that are likely to get requested or bid or processed in whichever way possible. So she can bring great experience to this. So today's session is hopefully going to be very enlightening. So bit of background for me. So as Chase has already alluded to, I'm an old man. I helped found TKG, and other than that, I've been around the industry for a long time, client side and supply side. So I am your host, and hopefully we're going to bring a set of questions and engage in the dialogue. And on that point, this is very much a conversation. So please post questions. We've got the chat box, and we've also got the Q&A facility. So as we're going through, please ask questions. We'll come to those at the end. But obviously, we're looking for this to be a dialogue if that's the best way to move forward. So I kind of covered this. So we've got buyer, supplier perspectives, how we marry those two things together, how we get the chemistry right, and how we ensure we get the best out of every opportunity that's presented. And what we're bringing this time is a lot of real world examples. So some case studies and the things that have helped. So lessons and things that have gone well and things that have not gone so well, just in terms of the forming and making the most of the opportunities as they get presented. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Alex, because you'll be tired of my voice. I want to hear Alex talk. So Alex, here we go, buyer perspective.
Sure, you'll be tired of me by the end of all of this as well. So thanks ever so much, Dave and Tracy, and hello to everybody that's joined the call this morning. So yeah, we're going to talk about making the most of opportunities through the bidding process, and just a little bit, first of all, about how I'm going to sort of step through that from a buyer perspective. So this really, the buyer is at the centre of everything, as we all know. So this is about understanding me, the client. We're going to talk about a little bit about what's driving the process that I'm running, and the motivations that I've got for the process that I'm going through. And then crucially, from a buyer perspective, some of the ways that so you can match what you do with some of the needs that I've got. Now, as we all know, people buy from people, and this sort of bid process, the pitch process, is a crucial step in partnering and sort of how you can build up some trust. So we'll dip into that a little bit, and then we're going to touch a little bit on bid processes. They're all different, but there are some common principles, and there are some common practices that can be applied. That from a buyer perspective, when I see those happening and when they're being done well, I get a real good sense, a real good feel for that. We'll also talk a little bit about what that looks like when it's not done so well. I'm definitely not a salesperson. I've got some vendor side delivery, but I think Leanne's going to spend a bit more time talking to you about that. So this is very much about my perspective as a buyer. Like I say, what it feels like when the process is run well, what it feels like when it doesn't is really, really easy to spot. And hopefully through these conversations this morning, we'll highlight a few of those areas. As Dave mentioned, I've done this in lots and lots of different settings. I've done it in the private sector. I've done it in the public sector, UK and globally, big organisations, small organisations. The principles really don't change much between those organisations. So the sort of stuff that we're applying here, you can do this at all sorts of different scales. One of the first things we're going to touch on is a bit of a sort of recurrent theme, so it's worth bringing it right out at the start of the conversation. Is this idea of win themes? So I'll reference them quite a bit. I'll talk to sort of what they are. So really, this is sort of the benefits and the features that you're going to run all the way through your bidding process. And taken together in combination, those things should be the things that are going to set you apart from your competitors. We'll get into a little bit more detail again from the buyer side about what that looks like, and Leanne, I'm sure will touch on this, from a vendor perspective as well. I guess I'm going to concentrate a little bit more on what makes for a good one from a buyer perspective. There's loads of information online about this. So go and Google it. You'll disappear down a bit of a rabbit hole when you do. I think one of my key messages to you this morning, though, is that the setting of the win themes is important, and getting to that point. Actually, the most valuable bit for an organisation is going through the process of writing them, and the things that you learn about me, the client, in doing that, but also the things that you're going to learn about your own organisation as well. So this sort of win themes approach is absolutely something that I'd be encouraging vendors to apply throughout. And one of the main reasons for that is because they really, really help you to get to the bottom of what's behind my bid process, and what are my motivations, and what am I looking for during this process that we're going to go through. So first off, it's about putting the client at the center of everything. As we are the center of the universe, absolutely, or at least we like to think that we are, and we definitely like to think that all of the problems that we've got are unique to us. That's not always the case, as you guys will know. But by putting the client at the center, there's the opportunity for you to sort of really hone in on my specific requirements. From a client point of view, when I look at different pitches from suppliers, it's always quite stark, the difference between the pitches that are about the supplier and their capability and the pitches that are about my organization and the challenges that I've got and how you are best placed to help me. And it's a subtle but very, very important differential there. And so hopefully going through this, we'll just be able to sort of tease out how to make sure that you're in that latter category, talking about me and my requirements and not so much about the capabilities, but marrying those two things up in terms of how those how your capabilities and features will deliver against what I need. The good thing about this win theme process, it forces you to do your homework on me as the buyer, and when it's done well, you'll be answering questions like from putting yourself in my shoes, where I'll be saying, why should I be picking you and not one of your competitors? What is it that makes you different to the competition? I'm likely to be running this with lots of different potential suppliers. So what sets you apart? And then crucially, what's in it for me and what's in it for my organization if I were to choose you? And in going through the process of really sort of getting into these win themes, invariably it makes for a better pitch. It makes for a better presentation. It makes for a better discussion at the point when you're sitting in front of the buyer, talking about the capabilities that your organisation is gonna bring. But I also sense that it makes the preparation for that much easier as well. So if you've done that early in the process with your bid team, then coming into the conversations, everybody knows what it is, what benefits you're sort of aligning behind, and that makes that conversation flow much more readily. Everybody's understands where they are on the playing field and what role they're playing, and ultimately what the objective is in terms of satisfying that for the potential client. Again, it's very, very easy for me as a buyer to see when that's not been done by vendors. It's quite interesting talking to vendors about getting into that sort of really, really focused and sort of narrow list of things that I'm looking for through the process. And quite interesting is that some of the feedback that I get is that sometimes there's a feeling that organizations feel like they might miss the mark by honing in on specific requirements, and therefore there's almost a sense that it's a bit safer to go broad brush, or there's a fear of being different. And my response to that, we'll get into this, is that the alternative to sort of really honing down and really narrowing down on the specific requirements that I've got is much, much worse. The number of decks and documents that I've seen where the first 20 or 30 pages, I could take an organization's logo off the top of them and I would not be able to differentiate between them. It's staggering, and it's so frustrating from a buyer point of view. So I don't think that there's any alternative to doing the homework. And it's such a valuable process. It can help you to learn a lot about me and my organization and put you in the best possible place in order to be able to sort of satisfy the requirements that I've got. Equally, I think it also helps you to understand an awful lot about your organization as well. And so going through that process, you learn about the capabilities that you've got, how that can benefit organizations like mine, and indeed where the gaps might be. Now, that might not help you for this particular bid, but if going through that process, you see where those gaps are, then longer term, that might be something that as an organization that you're able to then come back and address. So when it comes to sort of turning that process of talking through the win themes into sort of setting out your value proposition, so we're now into sort of what are the win themes and how do you go about sort of articulating them and getting them down on paper. So you've got these themes. They're sort of they're a thread that's going to run through your pitch, and the idea is that they should bring some cohesion and sort of real coherence to the pitch that you're putting together. And if you set them out early in the process, it's something for your bid team that they can align around. And then the nice thing about that is that they can actually then go off and sort of do the pieces of work that they need to do, clear on the objectives, and then they can sort of reassemble that and bring them back together. They've got to be written so that they describe the features of the offer that you're going to bring, but crucially, they need to focus on the resultant benefits and what that means for me from a buyer perspective. So really knowing as a team what they are is so crucially important. And as I've said a couple of times now, most important is that they're the output of a process. So by going through that together, you'll get a real sense of what what you're driving towards in terms of what my organisation on the buying side needs. Done well, they're going to be quite specific. It's going to be clear to me, the features that you bring and why that's relevant. You've got to make sure that they're grounded in reality, and so throughout this process, I as a buyer, I'm going to be looking for evidence and sort of case studies and proof points that what you're saying you're going to be able to do and the benefits that you're going to be able to bring to me have been realised previously, and that they're grounded in reality. And also, it's important that you talk about the win-win as well. I see this sort of shied away from sometimes, but I think it's very, very important that that's not just about a financial benefit to you from a supplier point of view, but what do you get out of a relationship with working with me from a buyer point of view. Again, if you do this process well, what it's going to do is it's going to require an investment in me and my organisation, and that's a bit of an art form. Sometimes you've got to get that balance right between expressing the interest without that becoming overly intrusive. But you'll find a way of doing that, and buyers will notice that investment in time early in the process. It's absolutely crucial. And what I'd say through this is you need to find ways of almost sort of being quite forensic in that process. So really, really getting under the skin of the requirements that I've got. I think from a buyer point of view, we're not perfect. We often fall into the trap of producing quite sort of generic sort of scorecards and things like that through these sorts of processes. And actually within those scorecards, there might be a couple of really, really important things that are absolutely crucial to my pitch. So really, really getting under the skin of that and understanding what those are is absolutely critical. So spend time with me. If I'm leading that process, then it's important that you understand what my motivations are. You understand what's keeping me awake at night, but also I've got a team around me. And the chances are that there's going to be lots of other people within the organisation that's going to be involved in this process. So, I'd encourage you to think about who is it that I've got to convince within my organisation of the fact that I should be going with a particular supplier over another. Really get to understand what pressures I'm under. So if I'm running the operations, then what does the pressure look like coming from from the commercial side of things, or from the finance side of things, or from a regulatory point of view? So who are those other stakeholders then within that organisation that you might need to engage with in order to get that sort of forensic insight and understanding of what's behind the bid? Really, really important to say that, going back to sort of that fear of getting it wrong before, I'm going to receive multiple responses. So the more that you can differentiate, the more that you can sort of tell me clearly why you're different and why that's good for me is, I cannot stress that enough. So really, really get into that, into that sort of forensic detail. And when you put in these sort of win themes together, and when you put into the pictures together, the win themes might center on a few different things. I'm conscious that we're talking to sort of small and medium-sized supplier organizations here. So, the win themes that might run through, you might be talking about sort of particular areas of industry expertise. So as a smaller provider, you may be able to focus on particular niches. It might be about innovation. And again, as a smaller provider, that could be because you're able to learn more quickly. You can be more agile. You can adapt more quickly to sort of specific requirements that I've got from a partnership point of view. Pricing is a win theme that you could center in on. It can be a bit of a tough one. So and one way that from a buyer perspective, I always like to break this down is that the price that's being pitched to me is one dimension in terms of the transaction and the financial value. So talking to me about what's on the invoice, that's one element of it. But crucially, if you can link it much more to sort of that value exchange, and then that comes back to some of the other areas of win themes that you'll be talking to me about, actually really, really helping me to understand what value your organization is bringing to me versus the price that you're charging. And the third element to the financial bit is then the cost to me. And I think this is a crucial one that sometimes gets overlooked a little bit because, if I'm working with an incumbent, for example, it's really, really important that you're factoring in the cost element of a movement for me away from an incumbent provider into you as a new supplier, just as an example. So really, really important that you sort of drill down into those. And what I'd say to you is, smaller organisations, don't worry about going up against some of those bigger providers in those specific win theme areas. There'll always be little things that you can carve out that differentiate. Final bit on people and trust in this process, and then I'm going to hand over to Leanne to sort of pick things up from a supplier point of view. But I touched earlier upon the importance of the win themes being quite evidence-based. That can be quite difficult without actually running the operation. It can be difficult for me from a buyer perspective to sort of actually see what that looks like. So very often as a result of that, it comes down to sort of trust, and that trust, as we know, it gets earned. So again, by engaging with the buyer quite early in this process, that's an opportunity at every single one of those engagements to build a little bit more trust. So it's important that those get used wisely. So do invest in the win theme process. Show interest in me as a client. I love working with people who I think get it, get my organization. Think about my entire bid team. There's lots of people around me. So I'm definitely not a planning expert, for example. And if that's part of the win theme that you're putting together as an organization, then find out who it is within my team that's going to be best placed to engage with in relation to those conversations, and invest time with them. Again, start to build trust so that when I bring the bid team together to look at the proposals that have been put in front of us, I'll be taking inputs from all over my team in terms of in terms of their feedback on what they've seen. And if you've been in there and engaging with them early, then that's only going to be a good thing. Do let your personality come through in the pictures. So many of these are sort of very, very generic, very, very black and white, and there's not a lot to differentiate between them. So it's really, really important that the personality of you and the team, your organisation, sort of shines through in that. Again, don't be scared to do things a little differently, and be human with it. One of the things that I always say to people is partnerships are always going to have ups and downs, and so it's very, very easy to talk about the good times and what's going to happen on those upslopes. Tell me about what's going to happen as well when things aren't going so well, and examples of where you've worked through that with other organisations and what that's looked like for you. Final point is just a little bit of a useful tool, and something that I always find resonates quite a lot with other members of the team on the buyer side is the idea of the principle of mirroring. So this really is about the process of sort of adapting the way that you're talking about certain things, and adapting those conversations to the way that I, as a buyer, would talk about. So at a most simple level, for example, the buying organisation might talk about customers as members. So use that language in your communication with us. Again, if you've done your homework, you'll really, really get to understand those things, and you'll know those things that are important to me. It tells me that you're listening as the lead on the buyer side, that's important. But also it'll be something that gets detected throughout the rest of the team as well. So absolutely crucially important. So I'm gonna pause at that. I'm gonna hand back to Dave, see if I've covered everything. And
you're not getting away.
Go on.
When we got a buyer in the chair, Alex, you never get away. No, I've got some win themes that I just want to kind of point at you. No, not really. So some questions. Couple of questions really. Now, clearly a lot of sourcing procurement processes have very logical scoring methodologies. So as you mentioned, you might be looking, I don't know, across 8-10 suppliers. What I wanted to just kind of tease out with you is trust and believability, all of these things that go into the human factors. Well, I guess 2 dimensions. What percentage of the scoring would you say is reliant on that kind of humanity and that trust bit, and how's it scored? So I'll leave that question there. So that whole like, trust, believe, all the logical stuff, price, capacity, capability, all that kind of stuff. How do you score trust?
I think what you end up doing is you build, if you've got the matrix of scores, you build trust in it every single time you're putting one of those scores on the card, because you're saying what evidence has been provided, and if it's a supplier, in particular, if it's a supplier that I've not worked with in the past, automatically you're also answering the question, to what extent do I trust the way in which that's been presented to me, or the answers that I've been given to particular questions that I ask. So it's just so fundamental, even in a very, very procurement heavy, scorecard heavy process. It's right in the center of it. It's intrinsic to it. And so again, when I said at the beginning that these principles apply whether you're doing this for 5 seats or 50,000 seats, it doesn't really matter. That trust element will feature in your decision making. So again, that engagement right at the beginning is an opportunity, and right the way through, and asking the questions and really getting forensic and really digging into. It's just that opportunity that you've got, because those opportunities are limited. But if you do that right, then over time, I as a buyer, my team will sense that you're showing interest, and that inevitably will play into the trust part.
Yeah. And then I'll use an analogy. When a plan meets contact, it tends to fail. So in that whole kind of trust cycle, is this something through a bid process and an engagement process with a client that is incremental, i.e., the more interactions that you have, the greater the ability to build trust. And equally, on the downside, if you feel you've lost the audience and you've lost the trust of the buyer, is it worth carrying on? So those two things, because it sounds, you've got this, and it sounds very intrinsic to the process. And what you don't want to do as a supplier really is it be invested in something that is irrecoverable. On the first encounter, it's not gone so well, and okay, that's where I'll go. Is it?
Yeah. So it is. It obviously, it depends on the circumstances that you're in, but I would struggle to foresee a situation where it's going to be completely irrecoverable. And actually, the trust gets built when you're in a live operation. The trust gets built. Usually, the greatest part of that is when things haven't gone well, and as a partnership, you've found a way of coming out the other side of it.
Yeah.
That's when the trust really starts to come. Is where it's your point at the beginning. Everybody's got a plan until that first engagement, until they get punched in the face, and then it goes to pot. And then what? And that trust, I think, in another organisation really starts to come through when you've worked through those difficulties together. So if you're early in a bid process and it's not gone particularly well, I would say that the same principles apply, and it's a bit more difficult because you haven't got those personal relationships necessarily at that stage, and that's what you're looking to build. But actually, if you can find a route through that, as part of that bid process, then actually that might work in your favour as you then get deeper into the process, because you've pulled through something, you've worked through something together.
Yeah. So that where I was going was, so a win theme has to be, clearly, from my perspective, how do we go about? We're trustworthy, we're safe. We're a good organisation, we're a good earthy organisation. You mentioned all of the PowerPoint that says how many people we've got, how wonderful our proposition is in terms of our people or our training, whatever. Actually, the proof is really much more about trust and building trust. So win theme. So equally, that could be a knockdown, couldn't it? So yeah. So you can trust us more than the other guys. So
and you know what, the number of presentations where I absolutely I see that. Yes, you can trust us. We're a safe bearer. That's lovely. How do I get to feel and believe that? And so the bid process is one route for doing that, and there's others obviously as well. You can do that through case studies, by directing me to other organisations that you've worked with, references and so on and so forth. So it's a combination of all of those things, but absolutely central to the decision making process. Yeah, brilliant. Well, one thing I will add, because I've probably induced a thought there, is never knock the competition when you're bidding. It's never a good thing. Yeah, never talk about the competition, only talk about yourself. And your own business. Don't start slating. Absolutely.
Use the time to sell yourself. So I think the last thing, the whole dimension around requirements, and you mentioned, paraphrasing, mirroring the clients. Is that part of the evaluation? So do you deliberately not put some bits of information that might be interesting, or do you leave kind of free form, so you allow a bidder to present themselves, to show and demonstrate that they've done the research in the company? Do you do those kind of things tactically?
I think you do. You do a little bit. You don't hide the important stuff, but inadvertently, sometimes when you go through these processes, I might not do as good a job as I need to in highlighting the things that are most important to me. And that was that's the point I was making earlier about the scorecard. Or if it's a big organisation that you're working with, there can be so many stakeholders that are having their input into this process, that actually what ends up coming out the other side of it is something that just looks like a really, really vanilla list of 10 things that are important to me. Yeah. So now usually there's only 2, maybe 3 that are really, really important to me, and that the decisions ultimately get made on. So if you're sitting there with a scorecard with 10 parameters on it, 10 things that you need to answer, I would encourage you. That's great, but the answer, where does the answer really, really lie? And again, that comes back to that relationship piece and the building it with the lead buyer, with other members of the team. That's where that homework, there's no substitute for it, and sort of really getting under the skin of it. So I might be telling you 10. I probably only mean 2 or 3. Yeah. So the reality is the RFP isn't everything. When you send out a document, it's not there to deliberately throw you off, because you're saying the intent is to have a definitely not, but we're human, we're fallible, we've got conflicting pressures just like anybody else, and so what we present to the outside world, it might not always be a perfect representation of the reality, and so therefore it's important to really get under the under the surface. And again, you can only do that with the human interaction. So, well, I think there's a really interesting, that mirroring point. There's a really interesting dynamic, isn't there? Because what you're trying to do as the buyer
is equally build trust in a potential partnership that you might have in the future. So anything, you say you're not infallible, so anything that you do that might, you know, kind of raise alarm bells inside a supplier might, you know, inadvertently throw that one off beam as well.
Absolutely. And that goes throughout the buyer organizations. You know, often the procurement teams can be sort of, there can be these sort of these entities that sit on the side and you know, that there are human beings in those teams, and there are things that they are motivated by and that are important to them and that they're watching out for through this process. So you know, it's important that you also find ways of engaging with them, and that they'll often be much more you know, a little bit more hands off than maybe the lead would be, or other members of the team. But again, you know, really try and understand what it is that they're going to be looking for through this process and what's making them tick as well.
Great stuff. Right, I can see Leanne is itching to bring a supplier perspective to this, so we're going to hear now the other side of the coin. So Leanne, can I bring you in?
Yeah, hi everybody. So I don't really know how to, I'm just trying to think about the best order to follow that, because I'm ironically going to mirror a lot of what Alex has just said in a lot of the comments and things that I want to kind of bring to life here. So a little bit of background about me. As Dave said, I've spent 20 years BPO and on client side, looking at bids from 12 to 1500 people through to 10 to 12 FTE. So, and the reality of that is a lot of what we do for both, a lot of what we do holds true for both. And I'm actually going to jump quite quickly to one of the comments that Alex has just said, really, which is when we're talking about the RFP and what information might be missing from the RFP, or what might not be immediately obvious when you come to answer it. It comes to sort of my first point on this slide, which is you have to be curious. Be really curious about your client, about the buyers, about their business. Have a think about what questions you're going to ask them that will give you those tiny golden nuggets of information that will make you stand out and give you that piece of information that your competitors might not have. And again, to Alex's point, these guys are reading maybe 10 responses to this, and they've sent out an RFP and there are 10 responses. And some of it you can't really customize and personalize. You can't really customize and personalize your IT standards. You can't really customize or personalize a direct closed question that is, how many FTE do you have? How long have you been, how long have you been operating? So when you're looking at that RFP and when you're looking at those questions, have a really hard think about where you can really dig deep and really be curious, really ask questions to the client that will help you personalize your response and will help your response stand out from everybody else's. Now, some of them might not be questions that you specifically need the answer to in order to complete the RFP, in order to complete the response. But what they do is they demonstrate, you asking questions and being really curious demonstrates your absolute interest in this potential customer, in this potential client. And there are lots of ways you can do that, because for me, the question that I'm always trying to get at when I'm looking at an RFP is taking everything that's written on the RFP into context. What is it that's keeping this business awake at night? What is it that they need me? What is the problem they need me to solve for them? And it might be the individual that's leading the process. It might be his or her boss. It might be the organization as a whole. And again, to Alex's point, you've got lots of stakeholders within a bid team, within a procurement team, who all have different views. Find out who's awake at night. Find out what the real problem is you're trying to solve. It could be financial, so it could be commercial. It could be a quality-driven issue. It could be a quality-driven thing that they need you to get at. It could be a language issue that they really need solving because they have a problem in a particular geography. It could be a particular channel. So it could be that they're looking for somebody who's really good at chat or really good at voice. Try and find out what those issues are and really get to the depth of it. So when I say be curious, I think it's, you know, ask questions. Don't make a pest of yourself. I think that's equally as important. People know, buyers know when you're asking questions for the sake of it. But really open up your bid team on your side of the fence to say, okay, outside of the information we can already glean from this RFP, what else is it we need to know to make our response come to life? So I think that's kind of my first point. The second point is really understand your buyer and understand their perspective and understand their business. So again, not wanting to repeat Alex, but coming at it from the other side of the table, which is, you know, it matches to reflecting buyers, drivers as well. It's that whole idea of mirroring. It's that whole idea of language, of culture, of, you know, making sure I understand what it is they do. You'd be absolutely amazed at the number of RFPs I've, you know, consulted on or been asked to help with, where I've seen a cookie cutter that could belong to absolutely anybody and could be going out to absolutely any client. I've even had experiences where previous clients' names are in RFPs that are about to be submitted. Because there is nothing in that RFP, there is nothing in that response that tells me that you have listened to me and that you understand my business, that you understand what your buyer is doing. And there are different ways that you can do that. You can put yourselves absolutely in the shoes of their customer. Order some stuff, order some product, try using their product, see what you can undertake by forensically having a look at their website, see what language they used. Use social media, have a look and see what their customers are saying about them. Really dive into the culture of that business and get a cultural understanding for what they do. Because that will reflect in your response if you understand it. And it will become second nature as you're writing. You will start to use terms, to Alex's point, you'll start to use member instead of customer. I'm sat here at an airport. It's taken me 2 days already. I'm talking passengers. I'm not talking customers or guests anymore. You pick up that really, really quickly. And it's so important that you immerse yourself in that so that you understand exactly what it is that you are trying to achieve for this buyer. The other thing as well is when you are thinking about how to construct your bid team, and this is super important, I can't emphasize this enough, and it might upset some people on the call, so I'm going to put that out there already. Make sure you have the right people in the room at any given point in time, and the right people on calls for interactions, and the right people creating your response. And the right people are not necessarily the most senior people. I have seen really, really good RFPs derailed by a CEO or a CFO coming into a meeting, sitting down at a table with no detailed understanding of what's gone into that response and throwing curveballs in a way that leaves their team really exposed because they don't understand what's necessarily gone into the response being put the way being put the way it is. That doesn't mean to say don't put your CEO in the room. Doesn't mean to say don't put your FD in the room. By all means do it if they're going to add value and they're going to make valid points and they're going to help. Don't do it just because you think you have to mirror seniority in the room. It doesn't work. And I can say that absolutely hand on heart. I've seen it happen so many times. Really consider that bid team. Really consider who needs to be in the room. The reality is, the fewer the better. If they're not, if they don't have something specific to say, keep your team tight. Bring people in as and when as well. So bring people in. There's nothing wrong in a bid of bringing somebody in for 10 minutes and then them going again. Particularly if things are being done virtual, there is nothing wrong with that at all. They come in, they add their value, they leave. What I've found is that a lot of buyers actually really appreciate that because the information they're getting is valuable. We don't have to spend 30 minutes introducing 25 people at the start of the 1 hour session while everybody introduces themselves and nobody knows really what anybody else does. So I think that's really important. The other thing is a housekeeping thing. No laptops, no phones. The only person with a laptop in that room, please make it the person that's driving. There is nothing worse for a buyer than sitting and everybody walking into a room and 6 people all opening laptops, because it's unnecessary. If you are opening your laptop and you are reading information that's on that laptop, even if it's the deck, what you're not doing is you're not looking those buyers in the eye, you're not reflecting their body language, and you're not actively listening. And active listening is hugely important. When you're in these processes, hugely important, because people know very, very quickly when you're just going through the motions. I guess the other thing as well, so when it comes to the commerciality of it, and I'm going to go slightly off piece here when it comes to commerciality, which is, and you're looking at your win themes, which is commercials are important, numbers are important. At the end of the day, nobody's in it to really spend vast amounts more money. The commercial themes are important. But don't lose your shirt, for want of a better word. Don't promise commercials that you can't deliver. That will ruin, nothing will ruin a partnership faster than commercials that are undeliverable. And again, the reality is in an RFP process, you know, people like Alex will look at numbers, and if someone is if someone's an outlier, or someone is promising something that looks too good to be true, or something that is significantly cheaper, or oh, look what we can do, and aren't we amazing because we're 20% or 10% cheaper than than every other RFP I've got in front of me, then I'm going to ask why. Alex is really going to give me a hard time as to why I'm cheaper and why my commercials don't stack up at least and at least align with other people. And it's very difficult because you don't always know what your competition are charging. You'll have a good idea of your market rate. That's where you operate, but you won't know exactly what they're charging. So whilst the commerciality is important, don't lose your shirt over it and really focus on the value proposition. What else is it that you're going to bring to this party that doesn't necessarily just sit with the numbers? And then I guess one of the last things that I'll bring out at this point is if you're actually dealing with an RFP that is specific and it's already out to South Africa, whether it's specific to Durban, whether it's specific to Cape Town, whether it's still South Africa in general, these guys have already decided South Africa is a really good market for them. They've already decided that they really want to work in South Africa. They've already decided. So think about what you're selling. And I know Alex touched on this before, which is by all means have slides in your deck, have responses that extol the virtues of your area, of what you do, whether it's KZN, whether it's Western Cape. Have that in your armory by all means, but they're already there in that respect. So really focus your efforts on what it is that will make you the perfect partner for them. What is it that you will bring to it? Not necessarily that, because everybody is going to say they're the best BPO. Everybody is going to say that they've got the best people. Everyone's going to say that their training is the best. Everyone's going to say that people are awesome. What's different about you? What's really different about you? And it could just be that you get them more, that you get their fit, that you can do something specific, or it might be something that is specific to your area or business. You may be doing something in the community that really resonates with their requirements from a, ESG and a corporate social responsibility method. Bring it out. Really bring it to the front, but try not to be generic. There's nothing worse than a generic pitch. And the very last one, I suppose, is create champions within the procurement team that you're selling to. Create relationships. I have a great example of a really large retailer where I was helping on a bid. We came second, but we built such great relationships that we still advise them now. And we still talk to them. And then when other pieces of work came out, we got those smaller pieces of work and we built that relationship. And that's because even though we weren't the right partner for them at scale at that starting point, we demonstrated enough for them to go, we really, really want to work with this smaller organization. We just have to find a way how to. And that's really, really important. So, if you've got those champions within a procurement team, it's very, very difficult for them to ignore you in 3 months, 6 months' time when new pieces of work come up.
Right. I'm not going to let you get away either. So I'm going to take slightly different tack and probably not cover any ground that you've already covered. But I need to respond to Alex's suggestions around win themes. Now, I don't know if this is a word, but winnability. Yeah. So from a supplier's perspective, RFP drops into your inbox, or you see a board, a sourcing board, and you say, we should bid that. You're obviously then in a bidding cycle. Is there any advice that you can give, coming back to the point around curiosity, around qualification? Because you don't, as a supplier, you don't have to bid everything, but you might choose to bid something, because the case study that you gave at the end, which was you don't win it this year, maybe you're not the right size, maybe something's not work from a chemistry perspective or a logical perspective, but you're building that relationship for a future sourcing exercise that might come in. So can you just talk me a little bit the qualification? Yeah. Yep. So what puts us into a process? What makes us think? Coming back to Alex's win themes, is there a dimension here that says, all right, if we haven't got a 1 in 2 chance on this, we're not going to go? I don't know.
It's a really, really good question, and there isn't a one size answer, actually, because at the end of the day, bids cost money. It costs us money as providers to build good bids. It doesn't cost us a lot of money to build rubbish bids. The rubbish bids don't win. So good bids cost money, and they take time, and they need effort.
Yeah.
So first of all, when I'm looking at any opportunity, and I look at it from a qualification perspective, the first thing I look at is, do I really want to work with this organization? Do I really want to work with that partner? And that's a question you genuinely have to ask yourself, because there may be organizations and you go, we can't work. We've got no experience. We don't want to work in that sector. We don't want to work in that area. It's not for us. And that's okay. It's conscious. The thing with big qualification, Dave, is it's conscious decision making. So be conscious and aware of the decisions you're making. The second one is take a look at it and look at the size and scale of it and go, can we do this? Can we do this? Can we do ourselves justice?
Yeah.
In our response to it? Are there things in that bid that we would not be able to meet the minimum qualification criteria? Now, that might be technological, it might be from a security perspective. There are all sorts of reasons why you might decide that you cannot do yourself justice, because what's the point in spending 3 weeks, 4 weeks putting together an amazing response if actually you're not going to make it over the first hurdle because you don't have an ISO 27001 or whatever that somebody might have put down as an absolute immovable object. And what I would say, just to contradict myself on that, is if you really do want to work with someone and you really do think you can provide and do a good job, don't be afraid to go back to people like Alex and ask the question, is that really an immovable object? Or we have this qualification, or we have this criteria and this capability. Would that fit your requirement? Because we really want to work with you, but we want to be upfront. I think people respect that level of honesty. And then there is, and again, if you come all that, like I said about the case study we did the last time, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to do a really good job and fail occasionally if it is somebody you really want to work with, and somewhere where you think your passion and your desire and your, you know, and your curiosity, I keep coming back to this, will absolutely shine through, and people will remember you. And that's really important, because smaller pieces of work do come up and different pieces of work do come up. And people do like to work with people they like.
I think, I mean, that whole, you know, that you have to bid everything, and if something's, you know, if you're trying to build a win theme and you can't build a win theme, then it feels like you're not going to win. So I just, that was from my perspective. I just wanted to kind of explore that. A little anecdote for you. An airline calling people passengers is very unusual. I on your curiosity point, worked with an airline that used to call their passengers SLCs.
Self-loading cargo.
So so it took me about a week to be brave to ask, what is an SLC? And self-loading cargo. Anyway, we digress, and I shouldn't have done that. But
the other thing I would say, just on that last subject, Dave, is that about not bidding, about having to not bid everything. What I would say is, if you're not going to bid something, be polite about no bidding it. Don't just not respond through an RFP. It takes 2 minutes to write to the procurement team and say, we'd really like to work with you, but we don't think it's the right time at the moment. Be polite. People remember it. Don't just disappear because you might not get the chance again.
Oh, very, very cool. Yeah. So, not having a CEO in a room. And the importance of, I think what you were saying there, and I'm going to use this as a segue into the next bit, was around consistency and people being very involved in the process and being very close to the process and very close to you know, to the win themes, to, you know, to the story, to the narrative that's being presented to the client, is rehearsing. So I think there was a little bit from Alex around, you know, the practicing, the mirroring, you know, the role that rehearsing and testing your proposition and refining and kind of working as a team internally to make sure that you don't have those missteps where somebody comes into the room and completely throws the story off piste. Just
oh my God, yeah. Yes, and yes again. Rehearse. And stand your ground. Don't let people get involved in the process at the 11th hour and suddenly decide they want to change something, and suddenly decide they want to move something, suddenly decide they want to rewrite decks, and your team who are presenting, and it could include the CEO, by the way. I'm not anti-CEO, I promise. It could well include the CEO. It could well include senior people on the board. But make sure everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, right? Everybody knows what the objective is at the different stages of the process, and that everybody has been in the right meetings, and that everybody has run through the deck. Everyone's had this. Everyone's run through the deck. Everyone has run through the RFP. that you're aligned, and that if you are doing a presentation, everyone has rehearsed your app. I mean, I have seen these fall down over and over again. I've been in the room when it's fallen down over and over again. And just because people have not done their homework, that's one of Alex's says, they haven't done their homework, they haven't engaged properly during it. And then one of the ways it can really fall down is when you get to that very last stage and somebody decides that two senior people in an organization need to meet as a last stage. So somebody says, oh, I'm going to wheel somebody really senior in from my organization. And as a BPO, you go, oh my God, we've got to get the MD in. Oh my God, we've got to get the BPO in. If that's the case, make him or her sit down and read the script. Because that can be equally as fair, because those two people have got to be aligned. Those two people have got to be aligned if that conversation has to happen. And particularly in larger organizations, it does. People like to, play the seniority card, but really do brief your senior managers, brief people who are going to have those conversations, whether it's high up the food chain or low down the food chain. Make sure that anybody is mirroring those, like that language and behavior and the points that you've made in your RFP.
Great stuff. Right, we got a few minutes to talk about some real world examples. So I think, Alex, you're up. Building ecosystems. Yes. So, I mean, the example here that I want to talk about is it was a large scale review that we were doing. Big sort of virtual contact center platform. We got a lead incumbent, and then we got multiple smaller partners within that setup as well. And we got some, frankly, we got some performance challenges within the operation. And as the lead buyer, that was my principal concern. But I'd also got two very heavyweight stakeholders that I had to satisfy, and frankly, their predominant concern was a financial one. So, if we looked at sort of the value equation, is the service that we're providing value for money? I was starting from the point of view of, yes, it will be if we can achieve a particular performance measure, and they were probably starting more from, yes, if you achieve cost effectiveness. And of course, they're two sides of the same coin, but we were coming at those from slightly different perspectives internally. It was really, really important to understand that dynamic within any bid. Now, our lead incumbent, the one that got the majority of the business that we were doing at that stage, was much closer to the performance conversation. And so when it came to this rebidding process, their pitch pretty much exclusively centered on that aspect of it. So that relationship that I had got with them, which was a very tight relationship, actually swayed the response, influenced the response to such an extent that response then became, really quite one-dimensional. What they didn't do was they didn't invest that time and that sort of getting into that really, really forensic detail about what are those other pressures, what are the cost pressures that Alex is also coming under, where are they coming from, what's making those individuals within the organization tick. And so we put that out there, we put it out to the lead incumbent and to the challenger organizations as well. Now, within that challenger group, there was one player that really, really stood out. And they really did run a textbook process for us. And, throughout that, they got to the nub of where that headache was for the organization. They directed intelligent questions to our procurement team, to our planning team. They managed to showcase some tech through the course of this process. They knew it was coming up sort of 2 months down the line. So they were evidencing that stuff, and it wasn't just a paper-based exercise. It wasn't just something that was sitting on a set of slides. And they did that by investing time and their own resources and energy with the team. And again, going back to it, building that trust and those relationships internally. And at the end of that, we ended up scaling back a little bit the work that we were doing with the lead incumbent and bringing this challenger much more to the fore. And that was purely on the strength of that process that they'd run and the steps that they'd gone through. Really textbook process that they were operating. And what were the characteristics of that, approach? Was it individuals or was it team? What were the things that you would say were the You know, the kind
I'd
the
say
more intangible hooks.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it was characterized by the tenacity of one individual, an account director, the operations lead within their organization, who just invested his heart and soul in understanding what we were about and what was working for us and what wasn't. And I won't say that was selfless, but it often felt it, and it often felt like this individual was just so on our side. And I think I used the phrase earlier. He just got it. He got it. He understood what we were facing into and what we needed, and and that just shone through in the bid process.
You said a great thing there, right? A little quote, on our side. Yeah. So that kind of relentless resilience that somebody put their personality, put their reputation maybe at risk, I don't know, internally with that stuff. But to unseat an incumbent, they've run further, they've worked harder, they've been more curious, all of the things that that we've covered. What about their win themes? Were those clear to you? Come back to that point around the articulation from a process perspective across the organization, because that's one individual. How did the organization?
So I mean, I've said the performance element was one of those themes that they needed to go after, and everybody went after that. So that was crucial. The other element to it was around our ability to sort of get the cost effectiveness, the utilization levels to a particular point. And so they very, very clearly picked up on that, and the pitch that they came to me with centered on how they could build some flexibility into the commercials that would satisfy those requirements from my side. So again, they understood the problem, and they set out a very, it was a very simple and straightforward solution. There was no rocket science in any of it, but they'd been in there, they'd listened to me. And then there were some other elements as well, like I said earlier, about the technology, where, having evidenced some of the capability that they've got, was again, that was one of the strands that they built into it, which brought a further dimension, got us thinking about some of the things that we wanted to do, which we felt maybe they were 6 months away, and they were saying to us, well, actually, we can do that for you from day one.
Tenacity.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm conscious that we're standing between questions now, and so your real world example.
I guess there are two that demonstrate very different approaches, and I'll keep it quite quick. So one is, I mean, in terms of preparation and making sure that you make the best impression possible, I did work with a sales guy once, and we had, he was particularly creative, and we were bidding for a really large car manufacturer. And we knew that we were having a visit, and we knew that we'd got to that stage. And we knew that everybody would do the same thing. So everybody would do branding, and everybody would put people on desks, and everybody would have people prepped, their people prepped on this particular car manufacturer. But this particular sales guy actually went out to a dealership. So when these people arrived, the car park was just full of cars that we borrowed from this dealership, parked all over the place.
He didn't steal.
He hadn't stolen them. He had borrowed them. So they had to go back. So there was nothing in this car park as they arrived, apart from cars by this particular brand.
Wow.
Which is quite kind of like, how does this happen? And then there was something quite gimmicky, which is we then got a bonnet made by this particular brand, and that's what we served lunch on.
Wow.
So we served sandwiches, not a clean bonnet, by the way.
Hopefully so. Yeah, hopefully I hadn't stolen it off one of the cars in the car park.
No, not one from a car in a car park. But the point was, we made a really big impact that was memorable. We made ourselves memorable in a way. The other one was with one of the major luxury retailers in the UK. And I'm very lucky, I have a retail background. And one of the things I'd done is researched how many products they sold, this particular retailer. So the question I asked, so we're back to mirroring languages, is I asked them how many SKUs they carried. Now, that wasn't the question that was actually particularly relevant. to us providing a service to them.
What's a SKU?
Service centre. So a SKU is a stock keeping unit.
What?
A stock keeping unit.
A stock keeping unit. Okay.
So if you imagine I have a dress, and that dress I have in 7 sizes, so that in itself is 7 stock keeping units. Now that's a very technical term. It matters very little in the world of contact centres, but after we'd won that, I was talking to the client director on their side, to their customer service director, and they said nobody else asked that question. Nobody else had an understanding of our business that took it down to SKU level. That it wasn't relevant, but the point is we were demonstrating that we knew more about them than our competition did. And again, it's just those kind of things that make people at the end of it go, that was different.
Yeah. It's important. I like the bonnet story. I'm just seeing somebody come in with a plate of sandwiches balanced on a bonnet. Yeah.
You should have seen their faces. It was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. It stuck with you, and as you say, being memorable with a client, they're never going to forget that, are they?
No.
Never going to forget that. No, really, really, really cool. So, to our participants, there is the opportunity to put questions in the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom of the screen. You can also use the chat box if you prefer to use the chat box. There is a question from Rodney. So thank you for that, Rodney. Good morning to you too. Establishing trust. So I guess this one goes to you. Well, it goes to both of you. But I'll throw it to you, Alex, first. There's a short window to build trust between the buyer and the supplier in the bidding phase. What are the nuggets that organizations could adopt to build trust and establish a good set of relationships in a short space of time? So that's from Rodney to you, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of an art, this process, and it is such a short period of time. So investing some time in sort of planning, based on the particular bid, how you're gonna manage that engagement, and how, to Leanne's point, you're sort of going to get in there and demonstrate your understanding. You need to put some thought into that process. One of the ways that you can sort of shortcut that, given the time constrained nature of it, if you like, is that there'll be information that's sitting in the RFP documentation. And so really spending your time and investing your time reading through that, getting under the skin of it, then honing in. So if there's 10 things that RFP says are important, start to make some assumptions about the things that you think really, really matter, and then go and test those out. So rather than talking about the 10, come to me and go, right, there's 2 particular points that I'm sensing are the most important to you as an organization. And I just want to test that my assumptions are correct before I go off, and then I put my bid together on that basis. And again, that act of engagement, of demonstrating to me you've been through it, that forensic detail, and coming back to me and let me know that that's where you think the areas of focus should be. That in and of itself will help with that process. And if it's not those 2 things, then the chances are I'm probably going to point you in the directions of the things that really, really do matter. And so again, there's value in that in that sort of step.
So I'll come back to you on this one as well in a second, Leanne. We had a question before the event around how important it is to meet people during the process. Though I think this is a bit of a kind of an add-on to Rodney's question there, just in terms of bringing humanity into the process. So I'm going to give this to both of you, just in terms of, obviously we're now in this world where, as we are today, a lot of it's done virtually. So Alex, start with you just on that one.
I mean, it's imperative, and the virtual nature of it means that it's much easier to do now than it's ever been. So find the ways. I mean, often you might get some pushback from a buyer. Busy people. I've got 10 organisations that might be responding to this. So if it's not me as the buying lead, there might be others within the team that you say, well, actually, can I go and have some conversations with them instead? If that's sort of relevant to the win themes that you're putting together. But you need to find a way of having those conversations and building those relationships up front, no doubt about it.
Just a bit of a technicality, because we talked a little bit about stalking and people pursuing stuff. Outside of just the integrity of the process, just making sure that you don't overstep the integrity of a sourcing process.
Completely. Yeah.
Standing outside somebody's reception waiting for them to walk in.
That's about that balance I was talking about earlier. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Leanne, from a supplier perspective, just in terms of that high humanity, maybe in the virtual setting, and how we get the best out of a new media, or now an old media, in terms of bidding.
Yeah, completely. And with Alex, it's use whatever channels you've got to communicate, and use them. Don't overstep the mark. Don't be a stalker. Don't be a pest. But in an ideal world, I wouldn't want to be issuing questions and asking questions. I don't want them to say TP have asked us questions or web help have asked us questions. And by the time this process is finished, I want to say we had a question from Leanne.
Yeah.
And I want that person, because I want to be able to use it because I want the process to become personal quite quickly, because I want that relationship to be built. So that will involve, absolutely use whatever channels are available to you. Face-to-face is great, but it's not always doable. We've got Teams, we've got Zoom, we've got whatever channel you want. But use, WhatsApp, be creative. If people are prepared to, interact with you on a messaging level, use messaging, use email, use whatever channels you've got to keep communication, bring communication up and keep it going.
Yeah, cool. Right, we've got a question from Ilana. Doing things that matter. Does this differ for service versus retail companies? So I'm going to give that to you, Leanne, because you're a retail expert. So is service different? Sorry, doing the things that matter for service companies, is it different from a retail company?
So just so I'm clear, for service companies, you mean like maybe a utility or
that's the way I read the question.
Yeah, that's the way I read it. Okay. Does it differ? It differs in as much as expectations can be very different, and consumer expectations, and certainly in terms of retail, have gone through the roof. What we are seeing in the marketplace, particularly with retailers, is consumers are a lot less tolerant. They are a lot less tolerant, and they have choice. So they have choice to not use that product, and they have choice to go somewhere else. The interesting thing with service companies is quite often the person that you're talking to doesn't have a choice. My personal view is that doing the things that matter is still equally as important. It's very, very important. We're seeing it a lot in the UK at the moment with our service companies in terms of, whether it's cost of living. And I know it's a global thing. So, being able to give people great service and doing the things that matter, regardless of their choice, is really important. But you do have to balance that with what your client is prepared to spend. It is a balance. And we come back to a comment that I made earlier, and a comment that I always make when it comes to technology as well, and channels, which is, as long as the decisions that you make are conscious decisions, and you are agreeing with your partners and agreeing with the people that you're working for, that these are the levels of service you're going to provide and these are the things you're going to do, it does become imperative sometimes for things to be consciously, we're not going to do that anymore because we can't afford to, or for whatever reason. And it's okay as long as everyone understands the implications of that.
Yeah. So we've got up against the time now, so I got a couple of minutes. So I want to ask for 30-second or 40-second responses to hybrid solutions. Obviously, become the new buzzword in a 2023 win theme, I guess, for organisations. So, Leanne, just your perspective on hybrid offers from South Africa and the plausibility of those.
Hybrid is something that people will always ask for. It is great if you can offer a hybrid solution, but as long as you have mechanisms in place on infrastructure, so you can guarantee the infrastructure, that's vitally important. No point offering a hybrid workforce that you can't get hold of. And
Yeah.
the second thing, which I think is probably more important, is what do you have in place culturally to make sure that any of your home workers actually culturally are aligned with your business and your client's business. And that's really not easy. It's something that really needs thought and really needs, if I was being sold a hybrid solution, I would be asking very specifically about how you maintain culture with a hybrid workforce, whether it's hub and spoke or whatever mechanisms you've got in place. So in a nutshell, yes, hybrid is great. It allows you to open up the work pool, open up the talent pool, really build some, you can really extend your impact sourcing credentials because you can put jobs where there previously aren't jobs. So yes, fantastic, but please make sure the infrastructure's there and please make sure you have the cultural mechanism.
Right, 30 seconds, Alex. Brokers, for our audience, I'm sure that their brokers are knocking down their doors trying to help them sell their services in overseas markets. So this is a very straightforward question. How much should we pay?
It's not a straightforward answer, unfortunately.
No.
what I would say though is, whatever you're going to be paying, there's got to be absolute transparency through that process. Absolutely crucial. And there's some principles in there about sort of the sort of longevity of it, and it shouldn't be forever, and so on and so forth. So you've got to really make sure that you've got confidence in that you understand sort of what that looks like, and like anything in this space, do some comparisons. Shop around. The brokers are there to help you do that, but not all brokers are made equal.
Yeah, and obviously trust. Trust is a big part of the equation.
Trust.
So,
yes.
Yeah. Well, look, I've got Siri now telling me that my time is up, and I need to say so. Just thank you, Alex. Thank you, Leanne, for your contribution today. It's been great to talk to you both. I took a few things from it around making sure that you're building trust, using mirroring, and making sure that trust is reciprocal. Work hard on your win themes. Make sure that they are as strong as possible. Be curious, very customer curious, and then most importantly, be memorable. So, and on that note, I will say thank you very much for everybody's participation today, and I'll hand over to Tracy.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dave. I'm going to add 2 more things in there. I'm going to say, what's your secret sauce? Make sure it shines through, and be human. And then just on that, remember that you're also a client. So you yourself as an organization go through a bid process. You know what it's like for suppliers to come and pitch to you. So how is that experience, and how do you translate that back to pitching to your own clients? So take your own learnings from that experience. But this has been full of a deluge of nuggets. So thank you so much. And I have no doubt that our audience are going to be better prepped and prepared to engage with the growing client community that is speaking to South Africa and to them. And as always, thank you so much to TKG. You've put your address up on the website. Thank you so much. So for all of our participants that are currently online and those that are going to view this on the YouTube channel when we put it up, please do get in touch with the TKG team. And as always, BPESA is here to assist and support you as well. Alex, Leanne, it's been an absolute honor to have you on board, sharing your nuggets of knowledge. Thank you so much. I know that the team is definitely richer for it. So thank you very much. And thanks for putting it together, Dave.
Thanks for having us,
everybody. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.